digital identities aren't all that new. Estonia has had various digital identities since 2010, and Switzerland has very narrowly passed their plans to introduce voluntary digital IDs. But nowhere is the debate louder right now than in the UK. The UK have announced that by 2029, there will be mandatory digital identity, which has sparked some pretty fierce criticism. There's a petition that currently has over 2 million signatures to try and block this. Nevertheless, the government seems determined to push ahead. I wanted to understand this at the core. So I brought onto the show Romain Moisescot from Veriff. Now, Veriff is one of the leaders in digital identities. They not only are able to validate identity cards online, a service that you've probably all used if you've signed up to a bank or something similar online, but they also are specialists in the form of digital identities. One of the things I've first noticed about this whole debate is that a lot of people don't fully understand, myself included, what a digital identity is. Is it just a digital copy of your otherwise physical ID? And how does this information get shared? So I wanted to start just by trying to understand from Romain what a digital identity actually is.
If you think about how things used to be in the offline world, it was very distributed. People have the ID cards in their pocket. They show it to someone. Now we're in kind of this transition phase where a lot of our lives have moved online, but these IDs are mostly still paper and in plastic, right? And, they've been designed for the offline world, right? And so this digital, I would say, digitally native form of IDs that are emerging, they are really designed for the online world. And in that way, they are designed with security and privacy in mind, in a way that is not necessarily the case with the physical forms of ID that we're used to having. So for example, if you're showing your physical ID and then you're capturing a photo of it to, let's say opening a bank account or even just buying let's say alcohol online, it has all of your details on it, right? And so you have to really trust, okay, I'm sending all my personal data, I'm sending my face, I'm sending my name, address, date of birth to the cloud, basically, and what's going to happen with that. So, of course, you can figure it out, but that's just a lot of work and trust for the end user to think about. If you go with a digital native ID, that can be much more explicit, we only share, let's say that you're over 18, and the company on the other side doesn't need to know more than that, doesn't want to know more than that. So that just gives a lot of confidence for the person presenting this digital ID that, there's much less risk here for me. I'm only disclosing what needs to be disclosed in a way. And same with if you think about the cryptography or security side, everything is signed, it cannot be tampered with. When we're dealing with pictures sent over the cloud, of course, there's always much more risk of fraud going through as well.
If we accept the fact that in a digital world, our identities are going to be sent online in various different ways, well, from what Romain just said, that digital identities are more private and more secure. So why then is there such a big pushback from people in the UK?
I think it's a very interesting thing in the UK. I'm myself from France originally, which always had ID cards. Then I lived in Estonia, which was a front runner in digital identity. They've had a digital identity for years. And in the UK, it's quite the opposite, where there has never been any form of national ID. So I think in the UK, it's quite a unique situation where you have both people resisting national IDs, and they've always resisted that for cultural reasons, which we can go a bit more into. And then in addition to that, now the government is actually pushing to go straight to a digital form of ID. So I do think the UK is not necessarily representative. They have the resistance of having the government interfering in the citizens' daily lives. And that's a very strong push that's always been there against national IDs. And then, of course, the digital aspect makes it a bit even more scary for some people because, there's always been an association of privacy being threatened. People have learned to mistrust social media over time. And so it's kind of, I think, combined into a perfect storm of people getting opposed to it. But at the same time, I think the mentalities have changed. Even past governments in the UK, they really tried to get these IDs adopted and never really even managed to get within their own, MPs. Now they have more of a consensus across the political parties, and I think also the general public, they have gotten used to using digital forms of anything, literally, like, and since the pandemic really increased a lot, so people have gotten a lot more comfortable with the idea that things can be more efficient when done online properly, and IDs could be also more efficient in this way. So I think that's kind of the unique blend that we have in the UK. But generally, the main kind of concerns that I see are really about both the government interference and the kind of privacy risk.
Within that, there is a very unsurprising point, and that is that it's not really the technology that's being questioned here. It's the trust in the government, the trust that the government is going to secure this, maintain it, and prevent bad actors from finding out all of our identities.
I really like what's going to happen in the UK because they will kind of force it. They have, I mean, what I'm seeing, if it goes through, right, with right to work, meaning that anyone who's kind of in the working population would need to have one. And I think that's the best way to build trust is, once you've seen it work in a use case, then, you start to trust it more. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have countries like Estonia, where, again, Veriff is headquartered, and I was living for many years, where just there is no, like, the whole country is like, it's the opposite, where, like, they expect digital ID as part of their lives as citizens and consumers as well. And if they don't have a digital ID option in anything like regarding the administration, they are, really upset, and that becomes a complaint, right? So I think that's, that's a path that every country is at a different stage at, but I think, it's going to take time, but at the end of the journey, we'll all be better off.
There's another really important conversation to have in this, and that's the conversation about fraud. It's one of the reasons why the UK government is so determined to push ahead. Online fraud and identity theft is really rampant, and it's increasing at a very alarming rates. In fact, various own research indicated that there's a 21% year-on-year rise in online fraud. This combined with the fact that 1 out of every 20 identity checks conducted is actually with a fraudulent identity card. So in this changing world, there is a need for a better system. Whether it's what the UK is proposing or not, there needs to be a better system to be able to deal with this digital world. So I asked Romain why this fraud is so high, and then secondly, how digital IDs will actually help in solving this.
You have more and more services going online. And so now, like, what used to be an offline chain becomes online. And so there's more and more reasons, basically, to actually do this fraud, to get something, right? Because in the offline world, it was kind of hard if you're like a kid, let's say, to pretend you're 21 years old. But in the offline world, maybe it becomes easier in some cases, right? So the incentives for fraudsters have increased. And at the same time, of course, it's become cheaper and cheaper to do. And I think the things we've highlighted is like, AI, everyone, like, it's obviously like a lifting all the boats kind of situation. But of course, it also leaves the tide is also lifting for the fraudsters, right? So it's cheaper for them to do very effective fraud. If you think about what are the fraud that we see now, what is it mostly? It's fake documents, pictures that are photoshopped, and again, like the digital manipulation has become much easier and cheaper and more convincing to do. Or, fake selfies, like I steal your, like, a copy. I somehow managed to get a picture of your ID, and then I just kind of make up the selfie, of your face based on that, and I try to pass this way, right? So this is, again, like, this is most of what we see. Those things, like, we fight with a many number of techniques, but like if you go to a purely digitally native ID, these become moot because these are bypassed completely. You are just sharing credentials. Again, they are secure, they are encrypted, and they can't really be tampered with.
Now, if you've been anywhere on the internet in the last 2 years, it will be very unsurprising as one of the reasons why fraud is increasing, and that is obviously with AI. It's very easy now with AI to create an identity card that looks almost perfect from anyone's computer. When the UK introduced the fact that you needed to verify your identity to visit certain adult sites, a protest site came up that allowed you to generate an identity card of any politician. Now, these aren't particularly good, but it illustrates a point what a sophisticated actor that is committed could actually do. So I asked Romain how AI is changing the game, both offense and defense.
The main value we see, we have a lot more data, right? So a fraudster is usually kind of on their own. I mean, they can get access to like stolen, let's say, images of documents and stuff like that. But we collect, again, thousands of signals per attempt. But overall, of course, it's millions, right? So actually, you have to imagine the scale. And so as we start to kind of, we detect a fraud attempt, it becomes a pattern. And then we can kind of, from that, expand and finding many more, right? And so AI is very, very helpful in kind of finding these needles of fraud in the haystack of all the verifications that we process. The number of signals that we can look at, it becomes also increasingly like exponentially cheaper for us to look at a broader picture. And so that's a bit how we can fight like these attempts on the fraud side.
Now, at the moment, this doesn't involve any form of digital ID. What this does involve is verifying your physical or traditional ID using a site like Veriff. So I asked Romain why people are skeptical about this, but I also asked what are the technical nitty-gritties of how this actually works? Does the site get my ID or do they just get certain information?
So you can think of Veriff like we would be when there is a request to verify someone's identity, we would do that. And then we are kind of passing that ball back to kind of the website or the service or app that kind of needs that. So there's not a generic answer. It always works this way. Like I think in this example, of course, the data has to be really secure and like all the usual like infosec requirements and everything should always be there. And like there's no excuse for that not being done. But on the other side also, and this is very important for this ID data, like to really only collect what you have to, like a bit what I was talking about earlier. So for digital IDs, it's easier. Like you can say just get this and that. For these, like let's say pictures of physical IDs, you do get more, but it doesn't mean that you have to actually extract everything and then store and then, actually like keep a copy on your servers. These things are not needed necessarily, right? And so for a service like this one, where I would say probably you don't need to know the name or the place of birth or things like that, and just maybe that the date of birth is enough or the gender, then maybe that's the only thing that they should keep really. And then if they had done that, maybe that like all these things we're talking about would have been prevented. So it's always like I would say the same rules apply as with any personal data, but like even higher bar when it comes to ID data.
Now, on one side, you can think of this as a pretty reasonable approach. We needed IDs if we wanted to buy certain magazines in area years. So why don't we need ID to visit that type of site? Well, as Romain has been suggesting, it all comes down to trust. If you trust that the government has the best intentions, then maybe you'll be inclined to think that this is a good thing. If you think that this may be a tyrannical government that's trying to crack down on liberties, you may think that this is a very good way to be able to track everyone's movements and even potentially blackmail them. The problem with this also is that it's kind of stupid. Stupid from the fact that it doesn't really solve anything, because a subscription to a €5 a month VPN will just get you bypass all this verification nonsense. NordVPN saw a 1,400% spike in VPN usage as soon as this policy came into place in the UK. So I asked Romain, what is the point if all you need right now to bypass all of this nonsense is a VPN?
VPNs, you can think of this, the current way that this is implemented, it kind of makes the bar a bit higher. So some people will kind of already be kind of prevented and like not go through and not want to go through the hassle or the cost of having a VPN. Some are like okay to bear that cost. So of course it's kind of, again, this use of VPN is because of the geo restriction, and we're a bit in this kind of transition period right now. So the way that I can see this evolving over time, you're going to, like if it's just one country, then yes, as more and more countries start to adopt it, or bigger regions, then for these content providers, it becomes a higher and higher risk of, having a fine or having like find that they are not strict enough. And then they will make it so that probably it becomes the default way instead of, that's just for this one country. And so it's always economics with this kind of thing. So again, now we're in this like emerging phase, and I'm not very surprised that this is the reaction. But I can really see that over time, both the user experience will make it less something that people want to bypass as the trust and the experience improve. And then also, as more and more countries do it, then I think the content provider will just make it the default. And regardless where you are connecting from, you will probably have to go through this.
After sitting down with Romain, I have to say I'm very convinced on the technology behind the digital ID. I think the part that's very obviously in question is the trust of it all. Do you trust that the government is doing this in the best interest? It's not something I can really comment on. But what I can say is from a technological point of view, I agree wholeheartedly that there is a better way to deal with identification, that perhaps some things should be behind certain verification checks. But do we just trust the current system to be able to do that? Well, I had one final question for Romain, and that's what he thought the future would look like, being someone that's immersed in all of this technology.
I think it's inevitable. I really think, like, if you think back about the payments, how it's changed, like even 10 years ago, paying with your phone was unheard of. And now I live in London, and it was the same when I was in Tallinn, in Estonia. It's the opposite. Like, paying cash, it almost really becomes the anomaly. It's still accepted, but really paying with your physical card is let's say, I don't know, some tens of %, but then most people actually default and you present you with the thing to pay with the phone, and that's it, right? And so it's so convenient, it's more secure, it's more effective on both sides, cheaper to process, that I think it's inevitable. There will always be a percentage of the population, like with any of those things, that don't adopt it. There will be some resistance here and there. It's just how fast do we get to the other side is basically the main question, not whether we get to that side.